A very good morning to one and all present here. It is both an honor and a privilege to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you on this momentous occasion. Today, we have the distinct pleasure of hosting our distinguished guest, Honorable Professor Dr. Bharat Desai's changes. Your expertise has eliminated the intricacies of international relations. Your ability, sir, to articulate the nuances of contemporary geopolitics has left an indelible mark on our understanding of the interconnectedness that binds us all. Once again, thank you so much. I would now like to take the privilege of introducing to you all Professor Dr. Bharat Desai. Professor Desai, we welcome you all today here with us. Professor Desai is Professor of International Law, Jawaharlal Nehru Chair and Chairperson of Center for International Legal Studies in School of International Studies of Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. He serves as Editor-in-Chief of the Environmental Policy and Law. Professor Desai's significant books in international law include Regulating Global Climate Change from Common Concern to Planetary Concern, Soil Law and Governance in India, Sexual and Gender-Based Violence in International Law, Making International Institutions Work, and there are many more that are added to the list. Professor Desai has mooted proposals for United Nations Environment Protection Organization, revival and repurpose of the UN Trusteeship Council with the new mandate for environment and the global commons, as well as International Environment Court. These cutting-edge ideas have been published in journals of international repute, such as the Repurposed Trusteeship Council for the Future, Environmental Policy and Law, ICTs as the New Environmental Sentinels, Environmental Policy and Law, the Quest for a UN Specialized Agency for the Environment, the Roundtable, and many more. Professor Desai's ideas and proposals have received accolades in official communications from the President of the 73rd UN General Assembly, the UN Secretary General Antonio, and Office of the President of the Human Rights Council, as well as the Prime Ministers of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the Presidents of Brazil, France, and the Russian Federation. Professor Desai has been consulted by the Indian Prime Minister's Office, the Union Ministries of Environment and Forests, and Ministry of External Affairs, as well as inducted as a member of the official Indian delegations to various intergovernmental negotiations. Professor Desai initiated and coordinated knowledge initiatives such as the Making SIS Visible as a Think Tank and the four-partner Jammu and Kashmir and Inter-University Consortium on Himalayan Cryosphere. We welcome you, sir. We kindly welcome you to come up on stage and enlighten the crowd.
Well, good afternoon to all. It's indeed a great pleasure and privilege for me to be here at the Symbiosis Law School Greater Noida campus. It's again, I'm really deeply touched by a gracious, invitation by my esteemed friend and colleague, Dr. Shashikala Gurpu, the Dean and the Director of the Symbiosis Law School, Pune. And I hold her in very high esteem. She values scholars and scholarship. She has been for a long time in touch with my center. She has been a PhD examiner and always has been very, very receptive to many of the ideas. And also she has been very graceful in making me to come down to Pune at the Symbiosis Law School on many of the occasions. And these are very few places in India where I make it a point to visit. You feel delighted to be there. Now this special lecture, which is Shashi has very graciously organized in honor of my late teacher, Prof Rahmatullah Khan. This is in quick succession to the previous lecture, which Shashi already mentioned, to my another teacher, Professor Ram Prakash Anand, which I had again the honor to deliver at the Jindal Law School on 14th of September 2023. And this is available on the YouTube channel of both JNU as well as Jindal Law School. Now, the very purpose of hosting this lecture in honor of my esteemed teacher, for multiple reasons. This could have been very well organized in my own home turf, my university, my center. But I thought that, well, Shashi was again very graceful in conferring Lifetime Achievement Award on Professor Rahmatullah Khan a couple of years ago in Pune. And I remember, meeting Professor Khan's again late daughter Meher, when she came to Pune to receive this award, because Professor Khan couldn't travel, to receive that Lifetime Achievement Award. And so I think it was in the fitness of things that again Shashi would be gracious host to organize this memorial lecture. After Professor Khan passed away in the month of March, I did organize the tribute in my own center. Now, this lecture actually coincides with quickly a few days after the 78th anniversary of the United Nations, which went on 24th of October 2023. United Nations has completed 78 years, defying all logic. All those prophets of doomsday who thought that, well, United Nations may not last longer because its predecessor entity, the League of Nations, did not last long. It just lasted 20 years or so. And this again a kind of a legacy which came quickly, after the end of the second World War, And so my focus primarily would be, I'll try to primarily focus upon the genesis of the whole thing, how the topic which I chose largely for the reason that Professor Khan in his initial years, including his PhD thesis, was on law of international organizations. His primary PhD thesis was on the implied powers of United Nations, which came up published as a book in 1970, which was his pioneering work, and I would say one of the very rare contributions on which I will build my edifice about within this available time to me. How this United Nations was the fulcrum around that time, and then followed it up with how the law of organization, which he himself taught as a MPhil student, he taught me, and that sheer interpretation of the Charter of United Nations, which he hammered. He was a person of few words. He'll speak very less, and whatever little period he'll try to explain or put you on that particular thing, like starting with the classical work by Leland, Goodrich, and Hambro on the Charter of United Nations. That entire commentaries on the Charter of United Nations, I still vividly remember having a very close look at it during my student. That remained with me, to see those intricacies and nuances of the Charter of United Nations, which very few people will have the understanding. A lot of people, they don't understand United Nations. There is a lot of I would say misunderstanding about it. A lot of people, and that is primarily the reason. There is a huge amount of, as I said, the ignorance about this particular entity, and that is exactly why we need to know the animal. We need to understand United Nations, If you want to know, and that is exactly how we need to celebrate that the very fact that this entity has been there, notwithstanding all the limitations of it, And we need to understand, as I explained, my own students, repeatedly, both in MPhil and PhD, as well as in my MA class, because there is a lot of skepticism that does United Nations work? Does international law work? And there is a quick, dismissive, derisory, or this kind of a very negative connotations, that don't you think that United Nations has failed? But the very fact that you don't know the animal, because this is a human construct. As the human beings are not infallible, this human created institution cannot be infallible. It carries the same limitation, which was purposefully designed that way. Whatever the limitations United Nations has, they were purposefully inserted. It was not created, as one scholar said, in a fit of absent-mindedness. It was done with a carefully calibrated manner to ensure that all those rival interests, all those people who have the that kind of a competing considerations, were accommodated, because that is exactly what the human life is about. You need to accommodate people with diverse interests, different, kind of a considerations, So here is a structure which was created, by sovereign states for sovereign state. It's a platform for institutionalized form of cooperation. Okay, it was not to lead the humankind to heaven. It was to prevent the humankind, going to hell. That was exactly, I would say, the very, very purpose of United Nations when it came to be created. Now let me see how I was initiated into the whole thing. Again, as I said, like Professor R.P. Anand put me in the field of environment, because earlier I did my MPhil dissertation on legal aspects of Palestine question and United Nations. So I studied the entire working of the UN system, the General Assembly, the Security Council, the role of the Secretary General, and the kind of the implied powers which, So once I shifted the base, this was my beginning, and my proposal, which I worked as a Humboldt Fellow, which actively, in consultation with Professor Khan, it culminated in this, one of the very pioneering work, which is published in, I would say, proud to say, in Indian Journal of International Law. This was actually presented both at the legal department of the World Bank on 15th of January 1999, followed by a quick succession, a lecture on 9th of March 1999 at the Max Planck Institute in Heidelberg. And when the director of the Max Planck Institute asked me to give this paper to be published in Heidelberg Journal of International Law, again at the behest of Professor Khan, I gave it for the Indian Journal of International Law, although it was delayed by almost a year and a half. But finally, when it was published, I had to procure the reprint of this paper, and to send it to different places, because the Indian Journal of International Law did not have the circulation of that nature. So this was my kind of a very detailed foray. This was the time when I started my doing my work, on the whole notion of what is called institutionalization. And this is exactly, I would say, that I'll give this credit to Professor Rahmatullah Khan. The whole notion of institutionalization, which subsequently took the shape of a concrete book published in 2004 by transnational publisher from New York. And I have acknowledged that one full paragraph devoted to Professor Rahmatullah Khan, and he was touched by it. This came much after his retirement, almost 5 years after retirement. And he told me that, bete, 5 साल के बाद कोई याद करता है अपने teacher को? I said, yes, that is exactly I wanted to do. I said, I do it. And so I dedicated that work to Professor Rahmatullah Khan, and always used to say, log Guruji keh ke mere piche chalte the, baatein karte the. You are the only one who keep in touch with me. Wherever I am, you call me. And so I used to be always with him, even including at the Max Planck Institute in Heidelberg, and the outline of that subsequent work. And this is the pioneering work published in the Indian Journal of International Law, volume 40, issue number 3, 2000. If somebody is interested, maybe of interest to you, And this is again follow up with that, because this is the book which I mentioned to you. This is I would say, both the title of the book as well as the outline of the book. The credit goes to Professor Khan. And I said, I have no hesitation, even after almost full 20 years, that this was my pioneering work, and I call it the trilogy. This led to this work in 2010, again on understanding the host country, host institution agreements, which was one of the important aspects which Professor Khan himself dealt with in his own PhD thesis. It was the implied powers of United Nations, which he submitted, when, I would say, late Judge Nagendra Singh, he was his supervisor, and obviously Professor R.P. Anand also checked his PhD thesis. But this also led to the intricacies of the, I would say, what I call it, the host country agreement. This is a very delicate part, and I have covered many of those host country. I dug out those host country agreement and host institution, that what it means by it, like the United States, United Nations has the host country agreement with the United States of America, and it finally led to this work, international environmental governance in 2014. So it's called the trilogy. So the foundation which was laid, again, it goes back to that particular time. Now, this is the structure. I would say, I hope I will not, it will not be much strain upon you people, but I hope you will pardon me. At least you endure this thing. I will try to squeeze as much as possible, but I thought I'll make it very structured one. My talk will, revolve around these 5 important parts. One is the setting. Second is the making of the United Nations. The third is the working of the UN. The fourth is the reform talk. And lastly, towards our common future. And I'll try to do justice to these parts. Let me first start with the setting. And I thought, let me before I actually go into this part, I thought I'll share few of my personal reminiscences, because that will give a special flavor this memorial talk. I already mentioned about how my work took the shape in the initial part, putting me on the hardcore law of international organization, trying to put value so far as the entire institutional architecture of United Nations was concerned. The role of the respective organs of United Nations, the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Secretariat headed by the Secretary General of United Nations, and obviously the role of the International Court. I will not have the time to go into those parts. There are skepticism, lot of pessimism, etc. But the hardcore, those who know about the law of international, there is not much. My very purpose of this lecture is to dispel that pessimism, negativity, or that kind of a derisory look, about failure of United. My whole look will be to construct that positivity, to take it seriously, to accept the entity with the limitation which it has, for instance. So one is, of course, a couple of other personal recollections I would mention that, well, Professor Khan always, almost I saw him, I grew with him. When I came, I was just 22, 23. And he and whenever there was some personal task, he will assign it to me, and I'll do it. I will always do it. He knew, he could rely upon me. And I remember a couple of concrete things. For instance, I used to have a lot of discussion with him, especially about how a lot of people turning up very smart and doing this, not publishing those things, And one mantra which he gave me, that has remained with. That is exactly what I would say. It changed my entire outlook to the people, the places, and the kind of the problematic that we face, in a country like India. I would say was in a chaste Hindi, because he said when he spoke Hindi, it was basically Urdu. He was from Andhra Pradesh. And he said, "Dekho bete, सीधी बात है. You should not go to what the others are doing. तुम्हें ये देखना है, तुम्हें दूसरों से बेहतर तुम कैसे बनोगे. How you are different than others. And that is exactly the kind of the mantra which all of us will need to do it. Because a lot of people will be there, a lot of people will have shortcuts, those things. And that gave me a different, like when you say the glass is half full or glass is half empty. You need to change your outlook to the people, because there are always going to be people, who will have the shortcuts in life, who will be very smart, and that stayed with me to take the look, very, very, very concrete, hard, positive look to the issues, the problem that we face. Second important, I would say, the personal recollection I can mention, is, I remember, he had financial problems, and I was in a position in the year, 1998 or so, to do something. I had some position, I had some project with me when I went outside, and I remember I brought a check and went to his house and put that check in his lap, although I said I will do the work and I'll show you as the coordinator, And he said, I'm really touched by it. He said, I know it very well. Even my sons will never do this for me, I will not mention the figure. I do not want to undermine the thing. It will be, I would say staggering sum, today's price, almost, it will be 15 to 20 times. And not only I did for Professor Khan, let me add, even for my other senior colleagues, late Professor V.S. Mani and the Bhupinder Chimni, who is now currently teaching at Jindal Law School. They can verify. Chimney is the only surviving person. Somebody can go and check with him. So what I'm saying is, I'm not doing anything special, I said I'm not doing anything special, but if I can really do it, I have to walk the talk. I don't need to say merely sir. And I think that is exactly what you need to, value things. I'm saying that you reach out, saying that can I do something for you? That is also another important kind of a thing which she realized. And lastly, I remember one day, Professor Anand used to be there, and I used to go to his room, and then I'll call Professor Khan. Three of us will sit there. I could have shown the picture, which is with me, but I missed out, And one day, Professor Khan got the re-employment, and two of the colleagues were very unhappy, and I saw it with my own eyes. they stop talking to Professor R.P. Anand, and then nearby doors, ground floor, first floor, and then Professor Anand was very unhappy, and he said, Khan Sahab, देखिए तो सही, ये क्या वक्त आ गया है, जिनको बड़ा किया, जिनको पढ़ाया गया, वो बात नहीं करते हैं, नाराज है कि अभी मुझे मिल गया हुआ है, हमारा क्या होगा, हमें कौन याद करेगा. एंड तब खान साहब ने अपनी उर्दू में कहा, कि आनंद साहब आप फिक्र मत करिए, ये लड़का बैठा है ना, ये हमें याद करेगा. You will, and this is exactly what I'm saying. I'm proud to say that I'm here to do that justice, to my teacher who died unsung. I would say, we need to pay the tribute to the people, because you grow on the shoulders not only your parents, but also your teachers. All of us we do it. We should never ever discount that. Like movie Bagban mein kehta hai na, कि, parents are not the stepping stone to grow. Same is the case with the teachers. Then don't do it. Don't never say कि this is all, that is all history, or you did it, so what? You must be grateful. You must acknowledge everything. Only then it accrues something good to you. And here I am, to do that, pay my tribute to my teacher, on the basis of that pioneering work which he did. Let me now provide you some concrete basis. The entire context of the work which Professor Rahmatullah Khan did, was, as I said, his PhD thesis was on the implied powers of United Nations. And this was very rare kind of a subject on which not many people had really dabbled into. But this was the 1949 advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice provided the backdrop, where I will not go into the great details, but this was the time when, for instance, the first UN mediator in Palestine, Count Foch Bernadotte, was assassinated, again by one of the then, Jewish, terror group, Stern Gang, one of the members later on became the Prime Minister of Israel, and the question arose that with the assassination of Count Bernadotte, who was a UN civil servant, does United Nations have the capacity to bring an international claim? And this question was referred to the International Court of Justice. And the International Court of Justice, because it went into the whole issue, and the court explicitly said the charter does not expressly confer upon the organization the capacity to include in its claim for reparation the damage caused to the victim or to the persons entitled through him. And finally, the court opined that under international law, the organization must be deemed to have those powers, must be presumed to have those powers, that you must be construed to have it. It's an inherent power. Like the human rights are, you are born with human rights. Nobody is none of the gift of human beings, Like the charter, the very fact that this charter was created by the sovereign state for the sovereign state, you must presume, or you must be deemed to have those powers, which though not expressly provided in the charter, are conferred upon it by necessary implication. It's presumed, it's already interwoven, inextricably part of the charter, as being essential to the performance of the duty. Because unless you do that, the organization cannot perform its task, in that particular sense. And this was the starting point of inquiry for Professor Khan, when he did this work, implied powers of United. He has gone into a lot of other power issues also, and this was basically, relied upon the legal personality of the Covenant of the League of Nations, which was created, set up in Geneva. Swiss government had conferred upon the League of Nations that kind of a power, because it had the agreement with the establishment of the League headquarters, in Geneva. Similarly, they had done it for the International Labour Organization, International Telecommunication Union, Institute for Agriculture and International Telecommunication. So those issues were very much, that was the background in which this came up. And so Professor Khan's, inquiry addressed that twilight zone, which separated the express authority from specific prohibition. That what is, because not everything in life is, and that's exactly the thing which you'll find in international law. What about the legal status of the activities which are not expressly prohibited by international law? Are they permissible? That is the predicament which the humankind has faced. That is exactly the issue which was also referred to the International Law Commission. Not everything is said. Some of the agreements also have, some kind of a quietness, So what kind of can there be some kind of a tacit approval, some kind of an implied kind of thing? And that is exactly what Professor Khan seek to address, areas like peacekeeping, treaty making powers, membership, admissions, etc., and UN's subsidiary organs, etc., etc. And this is exactly what I try to do based upon it in my own work, published by Cambridge University Press, in 2010, the host country, host institution agreement, And I thought before I move forward, let me, for the first time, I'm putting this in public domain. I thought, like I talk about doing justice, giving credit, acknowledging some of the contribution, done by something, and this was again part of one of the very rare kind of personal moments when Professor Khan had given me one of the reprints of his publication, which very rarely people remember and give credit to him. I have got this publication, which is 50 years old, published, and this will directly of interest to all the students, the faculty, and all those administrators of the National Law Schools of India. This is the proposal on the National School of Law, a proposal written by none other than Professor Rahmatullah Khan, published, I think it was published under the University of Pune, and published in a book called Legal Education in India: Problems and Perspectives, 1973. And you can see I have quoted the specific paragraphs, where the proposed National Law School will have to structure its programs on two levels. First, select a cadre of researchers drawn from different disciplines, say law, sociology, political science. That is exactly how the structure of most of the law schools is, for instance, And proposed National Law School could be constructed on another model, an advanced research center for comparative law, An advantage of establishing a National School of Law on the European pattern of Comparative Law Institute are greater, So I hope and pray. I will not go into the greater detail. I have got the original copy. I can make a scan copy and circulate it. But here from this platform of the Symbiosis Law School in Greater Noida, I'll appeal and urge all those administrators, including the Bar Council of India, those people who are at the helm of affairs in the Bar Council of India, all the vice chancellors of the National Law Schools of India, to acknowledge the pioneering contribution made by Professor Rahmatullah Khan. So far as I would say, the concept and the proposal on National Law School in India, we must be humble enough to acknowledge. We must acknowledge every single thing which somebody did for us, We will not be belittled by it, So I'll urge everybody, please do it. It is still not late, although Professor Khan is no more, but I hope, and this is exactly what he said. He said, my proposal was hijacked by the people. But bete, tum rakh lena. When the right time comes, please place it in the public domain. So with his permission, wherever he is, I'm putting this in public domain. And I urge everybody to please acknowledge and give, I would say, due to Professor Khan, even if belatedly. Thank you. Now let me try to take you a little quickly through some of these things, and if somebody can help me, I need to screen a video. This is the founding, they are called the Big Three, who are instrumental in the establishment of the United Nations, Winston Churchill, FDR Roosevelt, and Churchill, and Stalin, Joseph Stalin from Russia. And the fourth person you cannot see here, he was the then French, Premier General, de Gaulle. He's not there in the picture because these three people didn't like him. So he was not there at the part of the original thing. But the confabulations took place in Tehran, Moscow, Dumbarton-Ox, Potsdam, San Francisco, etc., etc. Even when the Second World War was still going on. And finally, it saw the light of the day on 26th of June, 1945, in that Opera House in San Francisco City. And finally, the charter took the shape, So I hope I can screen that little 2 minutes of audio, which will try to put the whole thing little in perspective, by the then American President Harry Truman. Because by that time FDR was no more. By the time the charter took the concrete shape, so as his Vice President Harry Truman took over as the President of the United States of America, and the honor went to him to do the.
We all have to recognize, no matter how great our strength, that we must deny ourselves the license to do always as we please. No one nation, no regional group can or should expect any special privilege which harms any other nation. If any nation would keep security for itself, it must be ready and willing to share security with all. That is the price which each nation will have to pay for world peace. Unless we are all willing to pay that price, no organization for world peace can accomplish its purpose. And what a reasonable price that is. Out of this conflict have come powerful military nations, now fully trained and equipped for war. But they have no right to dominate the world. It is rather the duty of these powerful nations to assume the responsibility for leadership toward world peace. That is why we have here resolved that power and strength shall be used not to wage war, but to keep the world at peace and free from the fear of war. By their own example, the strong nations of the world should lead the way to international justice. That principle of justice is the foundation stone of this charter. That principle is the guiding spirit by which it must be carried out, not by words alone, but by continued, concrete acts of goodwill. Now, there's a time for making plans, and there's a time for action. The time for action is here now. Let us, therefore, each in his own nation and according to its own way, seek immediate approval of this charter and make it a living thing.
Move forward now. Let me, with that solemn, the crux of what Harry Truman said on 26th of June, 1945, in that opera house in San Francisco, that encapsulate the spirit, that the United Nations did not come a day earlier. It was built upon the ashes of the League of Nations, and there is a question which we need to ponder over after 78 years. Have we lived up to the expectations of those founders of the United Nations? And as I said, it was not a perfect thing, including because of the special thing, 5 permanent members which were there, veto power, all those limitations we have to accept. Sometimes, you need to accept the inequalities inherent in a life, and yet you need to move on. You don't need to, and here are the pictures of that great moment, Now let me turn to the second part as to how, third part as to how the United Nations had worked, And here is the map of the UN system. I'm sure all of you will be able to see. So there are principal organs of United Nations: the UN General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council. There is Secretariat, International Court of Justice, and the Tertiary Council. 2 last organs, have been kept outside the loop because of the reason that the International Court of Justice is located in The Hague. It's the principal legal organ of United Nations. It's an inextricable part of the charter. This is the only organ which is located outside New York headquarters, for the simple reason that the predecessor court was associated with the League of Nations, and that's the only organ which had a continuity from the League of Nations to the United Nations. It had archives were kept passed on to the new organization. All the judges of the Permanent Court of International Justice became the judges of the International Court of Justice when it took place. It's located in The Hague, at the Peace Palace. And the Trusteeship Council of United Nations, which I will deal with later, it became dormant after 1994 when all its existing agenda was over. And so that leaves me with other organs. The Economic and Social Council, it is deals with economic, social, health, cultural. It's too unwieldy. It has too many agenda items on its thing. But it is a discussion chamber where plenty of good things take place. So my focus of this thing, will be in terms of what they actually do. And the question is there any scope for tightening, revitalizing things, and how international law is interwoven as a part of this? Because the charter is a product of international law. It's a multilateral treaty. Okay, that we need to remember. It's a multilateral treaty which with the sovereign state themselves created. It's the instrumentality of international law, and that is why the not only the content of the charter, but the practices and the procedures which have taken shape, around the Charter of United Nations can be construed to have become part of what is called United Nations law. And I would say at this 78th anniversary, the time has come that we need to at least, even as a inextricable part of international law, to study what I call United Nations law. Need to know the entity which has really survived. It's irrespective of couple of those failures, because the failures always get highlight, media attention. Even if few %. And I'll show how the United Nations, keeps working. Now here is something what I would say in terms of the contribution of the contribution of this majestic entity. People will say, what has United Nations done? And because as the time passes, we really forget. The very fact that this is the only forum that we have. This is the only forum where you wanted to really turn to. This is the only forum where the sovereign equality of states has been reiterated, at least in the General Assembly of United Nations. And this is the only democratic organ which really, where everybody wanted to be there. That is the reason why in the month of September, all roads lead to New York. Everybody wants to be there. Powerful states, small states, island states, including the National Liberation Movement. That majestic moment when on 19th of November 1974, when the then head of a PLO, which was called the terrorist group, was invited to the forum of the General Assembly, and standing on that podium, he addressed the World Assembly, saying that I have come here to seek peace from you, and since then that day, what earlier was the PLO is now called the Palestine. It's called non-member observer state. We should not still lacking that statehood. That credit goes to United Nations and the General Assembly. So huge number of those issues ranging from decolonization to the human rights, permanent sovereignty on natural resources, ending racial discrimination, right to development, environment protection strategy, the 1970 Stockholm Conference, women's rights, political rights of the woman, ending apartheid. These are the classical battles which are made. And the very fact that as Harry Truman said, when the charter was signed, there are only 50 signatories, only 50 signatories. Today, you have 193 sovereign countries as members of United Nations. That means the membership has grown fourfold. International law has grown both vertically and horizontally. This is unbelievable. So United Nations played a very pivotal role. Large part of the international world community was under colonial yoke when the United Nations came, even including India. We were also still under colonial rule. But India was made an exception for India. That 2 years before India's independence, Indian delegation was allowed, to put a signature, on the Charter of the United Nations. 1945, I'm talking 26th of June, 1945, India became independent on 15th of August, 1947. So that credit goes to the Charter. What was impossible, the Charter made it possible. The organization made it possible. Where technically, theoretically, all states were sovereign and unequal. Now, this was also another landmark kind of occasion, 25th anniversary of the United Nations, where popularly, I'm sure for the students also this will be of interest, where it was popularly called the Friendly Relations Declaration, which reiterated and reaffirmed what the Charter spoke about. After 25 years, you look back and thought that this kind of I would say, innovation is always possible. When there is a dire crisis, some kind of a contingency, when you have the doubts about the working or not working of the organization, this is exactly the Friendly Relations Declaration resolution, General Assembly Resolution 2625 of 24th of October 1970. And a lot of people have had the skepticism, like Ambassador Fabian also mentioned, that, by virtue of Article 11 of the Charter of United Nations, that the legal character of the resolutions of the UN General Assembly, do they work, do they not work, etc., etc. But I would say that, barring those exceptional cases, overwhelmingly, I would say the General Assembly resolutions have the legal character. They have contributed in the development of law, the treaty making processes through series of the tools and techniques and the procedures. It's amazing kind of, I would call it the remarkable engineering at work within the Charter of United Nations, innovation at work. The Assembly itself construed a lot of those things, on like the equal rights, the prohibition of use of force, non-intervention, peaceful settlement of disputes, sovereign equality of states, international cooperation, and principle of good faith, so far as the compliance with the treaties are concerned. And here are a couple of this listing of those major areas where United Nations dabble into what is called the global conferencing technique, ranging from space issues, outer space, environment, disarmament, human rights, issues of women, and population. These are the huge areas where United Nations dabbled into that. Success, failure, because one of the primary purpose will be spreading awareness. You don't need to use the harsh language that everything is automatically workable. Things don't work automatically even within the domestic jurisdiction. We know it very well. You have the stringent legislation, and yet you have the like we had the criminal law amendment in 2018, imposing the death penalty for that kind of a gang rape, etc. You think that it really had the effect on it? actually the rate of, those things actually grew by more than 27%, That means the human mind works in a different way. Law cannot penetrate the mind. And that is exactly what here much more difficult so far as the sovereign states are concerned. But United Nations has put into place all the diplomatic community, and they are there sometime at the heads of state, heads of level, government level, sometime at some other level. And here at the high level summits and conferences, which with the theme, the securing the well-being of the people and the planet, A large number of United Nations does a lot of this juggling, balancing exercise, calling the small island states, developing countries who cannot even afford to send one delegate. United Nations pays for the expenses. Look at the world that we have. So much unequal, and yet you take them on board. Series of those grievances, the issues which are sought to be addressed within, there is no other forum where you can go and speak about, issues of peace, dignity, equality on a healthy planet, Again, the summits and the conferences, these are listed for 2023, And again, the huge calendar where the United Nations system will deal with all those issues, Just I wanted to just flag this, And now, so far the reform talk is concerned. Everybody talks about, reforming United Nations, revitalizing United. There is no harm in doing that, because you always, try to chisel your tools, try to see whether the instrumental is work, is it adequate so far as the needs of a particular time are concerned. No entity is perfect. Nothing is perfect. Law also must change with the changing times. So is the case with the organization also. But the problem, we need to examine whether the problem, where does the problem lie? Is it in your political will, or is it with the instrumentality? There is per se nothing wrong with the instrument. You need to, that is exactly why I repeatedly hammer, you need to make it work. You need to make United Nations work. You need to make international law work. Like the Secretary General of United Nations was here, I think, during the G20 summit, and somebody asked him the question, that the Russia and Ukraine, that the war is going on, the United Nations has failed. Don't you think that United Nations cannot do anything? He said, why do you put blame to that? You chose to fight. The only choice is you stop fighting. You stop fighting. I can't catch hold of you. I can't catch hold of you. You need to do that. The purpose, as I said, like one of the very prominent foreign ministers said, that the purpose of bringing United Nations was not to take the humankind and planet Earth to the heaven, but to stop them going to the hell, living hell. And the very fact that 1/4 of the world today lives in the conflict zone. 1/4. Out of the 8 billion population on planet Earth, 2 billion people live in conflict zones. Unbelievable kind of the misery and you can see the things which are happening, as Ambassador Fabian said, Israel and Palestine. Dehumanizing of the entire thing. The entire international humanitarian law has been thrown through the wind. Everybody speaks saying that even the laws have the rules, Please stop. Indian Prime Minister said repeatedly that this is not the era of war. It was never the era of war. Wars were never permissible, never were there. Always the humankind struggled to tame the beast, to ensure. I teach a course called, legal controls of international conflicts, outlawry of war. Every time you tried, it didn't succeed. You didn't succeed. And so that the problem lies somewhere else, And here are some of the, I thought I'll just give a little peep into the world which we live in. You need to remember the world in which we live in. And that is exactly how you need to measure up the success, the failure, or we need to remember at the 78th anniversary of the United Nations, that what kind of world we are living in. Is it really worth living for? Is it really worth living for? Have we made our lives well? Although unbelievable technological progress has taken place, Humankind has gone to the Mars and Moon and all celestial bodies we are going, We don't know tomorrow we'll start living somewhere else also, But you made our life, our own life miserable on planet Earth. And I remember again those wise words of the late Indian Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. In chaste Hindi, he said, "Insan चांद पर तो पहुंच गया, but उसको धरती पर एक मनुष्य बन के रहना नहीं आया." You went to the moon, but you didn't know how to live as a human being on this planet Earth, And that is exactly your predicament. You need to see that how you behave at least as a human being. To have empathy for fellow human beings and other creatures and to your environment. You make your life miserable otherwise, and for the future generations will really, really suffer, The time will not permit me to go into this list, but I think a couple of those issues I have listed, 6, 7. There are numerous others like the world without glacier. The other day, UN Secretary General was in Nepal. In the backdrop of the Himalayas, he said the glaciers are melting. Most of the Himalayan river, Indus, the Brahmaputra, the Ganges will gradually have the lower flow of water. Imagine the consequences in the years to come. And he said, I'm crying out from the top of the world, rooftop of the world, like that small little sparrow, she was moving, running from pillar to the post, when her own forest was on fire, The predicament of the UN Secretary General is literally like that lonely sparrow. She keeps complaining, she keeps shouting, and people don't listen to him. You have the huge humanitarian crisis. More than 339 million people, they need immediate humanitarian assistance. You can see the situation in Gaza and whole of those, people are dying, desperate. The UN depots have been raided. Look at the condition, just to survive, Who created this kind of a situation? You need to quickly address this case. You need to address, and it's a question of millions of people, 339 million people you are talking about. Extreme climatic events, the consequences are there for anybody to see. And again the food crisis, huge food crisis, 16 million people, they have the food crisis in 100, and again 15 countries around the world. And there is also exacerbated violence against women and girls around the world. Unbelievable enhancement in violence against women and girls. Out of the 2 billion people, they say 660 million women and girls, they live in the conflict zones. 660 million women and girls, they live in the conflict zones. And you have the poverty, again, it has exacerbated, unbelievable, although we kept talking about elimination of poverty. You have the violence against women, I already mentioned 736 million women, almost one out of 3 women have been subjected to physical and or sexual violence at least once in their lifetime. And this does not include, sexual harassment. This does not include sexual harassment. In EU alone, the cost of the sexual and gender-based violence, is considered to be 366 billion euro, out of which violence against women alone constitutes 79%, 289 billion euro. And the people who live in the conflict zones, again, that's again a big issue, Now let me come quickly to a couple of these areas which one is talking about so far as the specific UN reform agenda is concerned, It talks about development, management, peace. The UN system has been this Secretary General, after taking over at the head of the organization, has been addressing some of these issues, And starting with the role which the General Assembly of United Nations itself has played, what I call as the conductor of a grand orchestra. And here are a couple of those series of those events which took place, were scheduled in the month of September alone. The high-level summits, heads of state, heads of government, which were convened on the 18th and 19th of September 2023 to address, the plight, the future of the sustainable development goals, on financing for development, on pandemic, universal health coverage, and also there is a planning for having a summit of the future in next year, summit, September 2024. And here was again the General Assembly, the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations on the job in Brasilia. She went there, to bring the Brazilian system on board, and took the message of the Secretary General, to different parts of the world, So UN system is already, on the job, at work, trying to address the problems which we face today and also for the future, And the General Assembly resolutions have also acted as a constitutional instrument. This is again a different debate. I will not have the time. Like one of the concrete example is the Resolution 2997, which established the United Nations Environment Program. So this is also very remarkable contribution, where a resolution of the General Assembly, people say it's not legally binding, and here it created an international environmental institution which has a global presence. Although it's not an international organization, it's not a treaty, but yet it works. Yeah, and here is the map of the global conferencing, all those 1972 to 2022, the General Assembly, how it dabbled with most of those conferencing techniques, try to address this, lot of enormous resources, effort, planning, and the message which it conveys. That is exactly what we, once it does done, we teach these things in the classrooms. Students write their term papers, write their dissertation, speak, you have the model United Nations, etc., where you talk about the contribution of the United Nations. That is exactly the best way to spread the United Nations message. And here is the role which the Security Council has to play. And Security Council, I have listed a couple of those things just for the purpose of record, that every year the Security Council addresses issues ranging from artificial intelligence to terrorism to women, peace and security, and host of those troubled zones around the world, every single day. There are often occasions when the Security Council, like here on the issue of Israel, Palestine also, the 4 times the Security Council met. Each time the resolution were defeated because of the exercise of veto by some of the powers, and yet again it keeps meeting. That speaks volumes about the divergence of interest, competing considerations, whatever the consideration the states have, So the problem is with you. You don't let the Security Council work. The instrument per se has no fault, The moment you surrender or you try to compromise with your egos, you let that go, the institution will work. The bottlenecks you have to be removed, And the action on the peacekeeping, huge amount of the terrain, where the peacekeeping operations is unbelievable amount of the contribution with the United Nations making, and plenty of the part where Indian peacekeepers are there. In fact, India took the lead to have all women peacekeeping force, in a country like Liberia. All women contingent, for instance, India is one of the biggest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping operation. And you go there in the trouble zones, where the UN compounds are attacked. Dead bodies come home. Dead bodies, they come home, You go into look at the barbarity, look at the venom that you have, look at the hatred that you harbor in places like Haiti, in Democratic Republic of Congo, or in Rwanda, and host of those places. The question is, you don't have a magic wand, You go there to settle. You go there to ensure people don't fight. Then the UN compounds are attacked, UN personnel are attacked, because they don't have the order to fire upon the civilian population, for instance, And you ask question as to why the problem is not resolved. Because those warring factions, there are resource-related conflicts, huge amount of resource-related conflicts. There are many parts of the world, and I suggest you to please read the Nobel Prize acceptance speech in 2018 by Denis Mukwege and Nadia Murad, when Nobel Peace Prize was given, on the issue of use of sexual violence as a weapon of warfare. Look at what Denis Mukwege says. He said, my country is the richest country in the world, and yet it is the poorest. All those mobile phones and the gadgets which you carry, that carry some of the minerals which are produced in my country. And why should my country be so troublesome? You never let it have peace, for instance. All warring factions are there. The resources have become their curse. So look at the problem that you have, How can United Nations put a lead on those people? So that's the nature of the problem. So I'm talking about the very hazardous nature of the job, the very fact that the organization is on the job, which you don't visualize, which you don't see. You want quick results. There are no quick results. You are dealing with human beings who are very difficult creatures, Here, women, peace and security, for more than 20 years, the Security Council has been dealing with this issue. It's again a huge area where women has been issue of challenges faced by women have been sought to be mainstream. There are plenty of those resolutions, almost 10 dedicated resolutions have been adopted by the UN Security Council. You have the subsidiary organs. I'm talking as to how each of the organ, people have pessimism. You talk only in terms of the action taken by the Security Council. Here are the actions concretely taken by the Security Council. Security Council went on establishing 4 independent ad hoc criminal tribunals. One was Rwanda, second was Yugoslavia, third was Sierra Leone, fourth was Lebanon. To ensure the post-conflict justice mechanism takes place, where the people fought wars. In Rwanda alone, 800,000 people were massacred. 800,000 people were killed. Yugoslavia had enormous problems. And yet you have the post-conflict justice mechanism, which United Nations did, And I just flip through it. I will not speak anything about it because the time will not permit. But look at the number of witnesses, the courts and the jurisdiction which each cases, they try to do, different kinds of witnesses, the trial, 2.5 million pages of transcripts in tribunal for Europe, 2.5 million pages. Look at the enormous work just to do justice. Only a handful of people are brought and arraigned before it. And this initially took place in The Hague. like the Yugoslavia tribunal took place in the Hague. Rwanda again, initially it was in Hague and then it was taken to Rwanda proper, And here is Rwanda. Only 93 individuals were indicted by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. You have the special tribunal for Lebanon. This was again for assassination of one sitting prime minister of Lebanon, Rafik Hariri. And the UN Security Council took the action under Chapter 7, enforcement action, established a tribunal, and caught hold of a couple of those people. So I'm talking about you can have a contrasting example. In Pakistan, the former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto was assassinated and nothing was done. The UN inquiry said the telltale evidence, of premeditated murder. And the Pakistan government was not interested to have any UN, because the UN inquiry pointed the gun, all evidence was destroyed. And finally, but it did not lead to a kind of international kind of a tribunal to punish and prosecute the people. So countries themselves, they have their own hands, You had in Cambodia, it was too late. By the time 1/3 of the Cambodian population was massacred. By that time, Pol Pot was gone. By the time when this extraordinary chamber for Cambodia came to be established, And here is the residual mechanism in Sierra Leone. Again, I'm talking about the trouble zones, conflict zones, where the lives of the people are miserable. Each of those conflict zones. The question is, United Nations does it. It has to raise the funding. It has to find the people, have objectivity, have all the legalities and instruments to be put into place just to ensure, because your national system doesn't work. Your national system doesn't work. We had in our own neighborhood the questions about doing a similar kind of a post-conflict justice mechanism in Sri Lanka or in Nepal. That still defies logic. But the question is the limits of it. Limits of these all efforts, global effort that you make. And the Secretary General of the United Nations, I will not have much time to spend on this, but I'm sure he's one of the very rare Secretary Generals who speaks with that political background, former Prime Minister of Portugal, with that kind of a stature, he speaks truth to power. He speaks very bluntly, he does his homework. You need to at least see the speeches with the Secretary General of the United Nations has done. Amazing, unbelievable amount of energy he carries. He goes from place to place. And how much, I'm sure he must be so troubled, to see, the different things, where, and he has to innovate. He is the one liaison person between the General Assembly, the Security Council. He wants the entire, he's the chief executive officer. He ensures the entire, organization runs that the show of the organization is run. Is a visible face of the organization. He has to carry everything, notwithstanding all the hiccups and the problems that you have. Often he goes to the Security Council and tells the permanent members to behave, to do something. He said the time is running out. He speaks, but people must listen to him. We must have the capacity to, pay heed to it, to make things work. If you want United Nations to work, you must pay heed to them. Now, let me see, I think the final part, towards our common future, from summit of the future, and how do you walk the talk, and international law instrumentalities will be inextricable part of this entire enterprise which I'm talking about. And I thought I'll start with some of the work which I myself did in last 3 years, 3 ideational things which covered 55 contributions by those outstanding scholars from different parts of the world, different continents actually, and 23, 22, and 2021. These are the seeds. It has sown the seeds. It has laid down some of those ideas for our future, which we are really talking about. And now it will lead us to, next year, the planetary future, which I have listed the names of about 24 outstanding scholars who have sent the confirmations, so ranging from starting with Nick Robinson, Edith Brown Weiss, Owen McIntyre, Klaus Boselman, Jan Agula, Kazuhiro Nakatani, Benjamin Richardson, Syed Mahmoudi, David Vanderzeg, Oliver Ruppel, Benjamin Bohr, Sin Paine, Patricia Mbote, Oran Young, Jody Jaria Manzano, David Boyd, Evan Darian Smith, Richard McCrory, Veselin Popovsky, Lauren Eastwood, Dr. Karan Singh, Maria Fernanda Espinoza Garces, the former president of the UN General Assembly, Shailesh Nayak, the director of the NIAS, Bangalore, and finally Nico Sridhar, the emeritus professor at Leiden University and member of the Council of States. So this is the future. This will come out around June 2024, and in September is the summit of the future. So we need this dabbling into, we need to have the scope for finding solutions to those things. We need this ideational thing. You can't crib and complain about it, We need to ensure that it works, hope against hope, as I call it, audacity of hope. as long as the sun shines, you need to work on it. Because that is exactly what the whole ability about being a human is, You cannot give hope, like the Indian Prime Minister himself says, कि हताश हो जाना, नाराज हो जाना, छोड़ देना, कि कुछ नहीं होने वाला है, कुछ नहीं. You can't be pessimistic. You can't be pessimistic. I know the odds are very heavy and challenges are enormous, But it's always there are wise people, few sane people who really fix it, who will try to come out with the solutions, It's a very, very difficult thing, I would say almost akin to the Gandhian kind of a predicament around the time of the India's independence, And I think if the really your earth is, and I remember here I will little differ from what my own teacher, Professor Khan, told me. He said, "Tum apne aap koi solution mat batana." But I thought that instead of waiting, because we can't wait for somebody to come from the different galaxies and the planets to come here on planet Earth to find the solution. Only the human beings have to do it, And if I do it, why not, And I encourage my students also when they write the PhD thesis, to come out with concrete ideas. Don't hesitate. That no age is not the bar, the level is not the bar. You need ideas. वो किसी का मोहताज नहीं है कोई, ठीक है? So I think we need to do it, and I thought this is an enormous kind of work. I'm sure without resources, and we'll see by the time something it will yield results, And concrete 4 or 5 ideas I will just suggest, before I just close, is what I call as couple of things like the bird in hand is better than two in the bush. I don't want to wait for the utopia. There is no utopia around. It's nothing going to happen if you wait for eternity to take place. Because there are already people who have suggested about you invoking Article 109 of the Charter of United Nations to have a general conference for review of the Charter. The world in which we live in, the kind of the polarization which is at stake, it's literally almost impossible, to have any kind of a general conference, review conference to reopen the Charter. It will be like opening a Pandora's box. So my take will be, knowing the ground realities well, I thought we must tighten the screws, try to see that the organization is made to work, extrapolate, try to use, bank upon that doctrine of implied power, see that, something which you carry by implication and necessity. And the United Nations system has enormous scope for it. Let me give 2 concrete examples, because people are not, that you make it work, although the Charter does not talk about something else. You have the Charter, the 5 permanent members. One is the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The USSR is gone. And it's the Russian Federation which has stepped into the show. The Charter still speaks about Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. There was no observer system. The Charter is wedded to the sovereign states, And they created, the credit goes to, again, a professor of international law, a Belgian scholar, Eric Sui, who invented this idea of having an observer system. International system was used to it. So that is exactly what brought the national liberation movement within the domain of the United Nations, So the United Nations not only limited to sovereign states, but observers like Vatican and Palestine. And also there are other observers also, Or like bringing in a deputy secretary of the United Nations, the Charter does not talk about it. So you can always innovate, extrapolate, by implication, something which is inevitable, something which is destined, something which you are expected to do. The question is, if the something which was not foreseen in 78 years ago, if you can make sense of it, if you can interpret, constructive, positive, that is exactly what the legal interpretation is all about, make it work. Any legal law which a judge will be sitting on the chamber, he'll say, I'll do the positive, constructive interpretation to make this law work for the benefit of the people, for the humankind, And that is exactly what the task challenge which we have, rather than complaining and, cribbing about it. And I thought we can reap the low-hanging fruits, because the enormous, having done the work, having been privy to the whole thing, I know is going to be people are going to be very selective. It's going to be different work. So why not we reap the fruits, which are really low hanging, which is easy, no cost. And here are the low cost, I would say, the low hanging fruits, like one of the important instrumentally to address some of the global problems, like you have 16 specialized agencies dealing with numerous subjects except environment. You don't have a specialized, which I have been talking for last many years. And I think it's the UN Environment Program sitting in Nairobi, which again, credit goes to India to allow Nairobi to have the headquarters of the then Indian Prime Minister. She said, let Nairobi have it, let Africa have this. For the first time, a major institution was located to Nairobi on the African continent. So I think the time has come to upgrade this entity into a specialized agency. It has been inching gradually closer to it, but finally the trappings of whatever called the treaty making competence, and other things, it must have the final culmination, what I call as the United Nations Environment Protection Organization. Second important is again the repurpose of the Trusteeship Council. I have been speaking about it since 1999. People had closed the chapter. A lot of people had taken a saying that, this is something not doable, it's not practical. After 20 years, the Secretary General of United Nations, in his report in 2021, Our Common Agenda, said the time has now come to repurpose the trusteeship. And this is the only proposal. This is the only proposal, I would say, if I don't talk about the globally, at least from the global south, this is the only scholarly proposal which has really given the flesh and bones into the revival and the repurpose of the Trusteeship Council, change the mandate. It can be done by changing the rules of procedure. It can be done through very innovative, without even formal amendment of the charter. It's doable. That is exactly where human innovation is required. That kind of a, legal niceties, which you can put without, if the amendment of the charter can work, fine. If it doesn't work, I would say we need to work around it. There are plenty of the practices and the procedures where you made it work. And that is the time where you need to do that part. The third important part, which I thought I'll mention, is the Security Council expansion, which every country has been talking about it. We ourselves are part of the whole thing. People with veto, without veto, and you know it very well, that in the foreseeable future, this is not going to be happening anywhere. So the question is, I think all that you have been asking for is, your voice must be heard. You must be there. Like India was member of the having a non-permanent seat of the UN Security Council for 2 years till December 2022. So there are those P4 countries like India, Japan, Germany, and Brazil. They have been, asking for a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. No one is explicitly talking about the veto power. Forget about the veto power, because veto wielding powers will not allow you to meddle into that. But the question is, if your presence or participation could be ensured somehow, like most of those kinds of top level meetings when the agenda takes place, the Security Council president in a particular month invites not only the other states, NGOs, but also even scholars also, and other some relevant people who are there. Although very rarely the Security Council reach out to call a scholar from this part of the world, because New Delhi is too far from New York. So I think that we need to crack it. Then you must look beyond it, and obviously we need to have those scholars who will be doing work of that level, which will really address the global problematic. So there is always innovations and possibilities where you rope in. You can make a regular practice also, where monthly meetings, most of these countries, maybe the P5, there are some countries from African continent, like the BRICS countries will also want it. So instead of 15 members, assuming you add 10 more, who can be part and parcel of the routine thing, part of the confabulation, discussions, etc. Maybe at the time when a final vote is taken, probably they may not do that, but that's fine. That is what the observer system is all about. The very fact that your presence is there, you are present in the room, you are listening to the talk, you are able to contribute to the debate, that itself is a major difference. So I would say, till pending any such future, remote possibility for expansion of the UN Security Council, you keep talking and craving about it. Everybody, Indian Prime Minister has repeatedly said that the United Nations belongs to the different era. We need to revitalize it, for instance. And in one of the meeting addressed to the G20 in Riyadh, he said, we need to have what is called the trusteeship for the planet. He has spoken till that time. The question is, what next? So these are, I'm talking the concrete issues and ideas which are there. And the other final part could be, now we are gradually inching toward the future of what is called the future generations, for instance, that what will they inherit? With the conflicts which I am talking about, 1/4 of the world in 2050, again, you have the 10 billion population. We need 3 planets to sustain this human population on planet Earth. 3 planets. You don't have the resources. And with huge amount of conflicts, what will you live? You imagine the plight of the people, those children, unbelievable amount of children who have killed, more large number of children and women who have been killed, for instance, or the children who are brought up in the conflict zone. Imagine the trauma which they undergo, for instance. Do we really deserve that? Where are those wise people? Where are those globetrotters? Where are those special envoys? Who thought that they will crack the world, who will resolve the issues? Everybody must be on the job. This has to be got the top priority. The UN system is on the job. A lot of people, UN Secretary General, his envoys, his people are there. But the peace, like Mahabharat, in Mahabharat also Lord Krishna and everybody said, there is no substitute for peace. There is no substitute for peace. War is not the answer. If it was true in Mahabharat, period of Mahabharat, same is true today also. Peace has no substitutes. Peace has to be the final choice. Wars must be banished, And I think for that, we need to really have those things, and especially, so for where do you head, for instance? And I would suggest concretely that maybe the time has come when the Secretary General of the United Nations can move, or have a concrete, appoint somebody as the United Nations High Commissioner for future generations. There could be many other innovations which could be possible, for instance, Not moving. Okay, so I'll just skip this part. The UNEPO outline, I have already mentioned about it. This is available in some of my works. So please feel free. Even if you write UNEPO, the Google will tell you the articles and everything. United Nations Environment Protection. This is the blueprint which is suggested, and the Trusteeship Council which I am talking about. And here is the thing. Modification of Article 86, 87, and 88 of the Charter, writing concretely about those key. What mandate it will have? Now, this is what the Secretary General of the United Nations suggested: repurpose of the United Nations. So, what do you suggest as a repurpose? What do you suggest as a repurpose? And you need concretely that idea as a mandate, new mandate for environment and the global commons, Here is again the same article which are rewritten, as a part of this part of the whole thing, And finally, let me come back again to what my teacher had suggested, in drawing the UN mandate at the 78th anniversary of United Nations, like what the reparations case said, that ICJ took the view on the quantum of the rights and duties, of the UN as different from the states, And ICJ said that whereas a state possesses the totality of the international rights and duties recognized by international law, the rights and duties of an entity such as organization must depend upon its purposes and functions as specified or implied in its constituent instrument. So the whole idea is what is implied. Not everything is in black and white. And we know it very well. There are many of the legislation that is exactly the job of a creative lawyer, or job of a voracious or like a judge who is a philosopher, to read between the lines. And I remember vividly my interaction with the late Justice P.N. Bhagwati as a student, and I wrote a tribute to Justice Bhagwati, a judge as a philosopher, That judge sees things which you can't see. Judge interprets things, which are generally not within the domain of a layman, And you need to, because you want overall the system to work, the law to work. So you need to have positive, constructive interpretation, where, there's something, if this organization has to be made to work, you need to have that something by what I call necessary implication, And this brought the whole range of the functions and powers of that organization exercised in the course of the practice under the cover of the legality. And sufficient attention had to be paid to accretion of the powers through usage and practice. You need to develop that use and practice, something which is by implication. What I call, like in the legal arena, you call analogy. If there is no directly relevant practice or precedent is available, you derive something from the closest possible area, and you apply that to the particular problem which you need to resolve. Similarly, something by implication. It is implied, it is read between the line, it is presumed that you need to do this, Unless you do it, unless you have the wherewithal, unless you have the means, how can you deliver the results, for instance, And your larger purpose is the future of the humankind, future of this planet Earth itself. And I thought that this is exactly what it will show, so far as the with this, I think I'll try to just sum up my thing, although it exceeded some time, But what I'll try to suggest, is that at this time, when I recall at the 78th anniversary of the United Nations, and on this occasion, when I remember and recall the pioneering work done by my own teacher on law of international organization, his grasp over that particular interpretation of the provisions of the Charter of United Nations, actual working of the Charter of United Nations, for instance, the nitty-gritty of it. And as I said, he had excellent command over English language, he'll write few words, excellently communicate those things, And that is what many of his writings, they speak volumes about it, you know. And I thought I was trying to, imbibe the best from him. That is exactly what I'll do from anyone. I'll take only the positive things, best things from my own teachers, you know. And I thought I try to, walk the talk. I tried to do justice to whatever was possible under very difficult circumstances. And so and as I said, I didn't just come here to do my mundane job here, you know. And I thought I'll try to go into the deeper aspects of the intricacies of international law with that kind of a approach where the not to try to find fault with international law or United Nations, you know, as I said, to make it work, you know, and for which you need to walk the talk. You need to do work at that level. And here I would say there is also onus on a country like India, you know, where we need to, as I suggested at the different levels also, we need to, strengthen our own knowledge architecture, you know, our schools of law and elsewhere, you know, and we need to do justice, I would say, taking international law seriously, making international law work. And if you do so, I'm sure the United Nations will also be able to deliver the results, rejecting the negativity, rejecting the kind of those views, you know, that don't you think that United Nations cannot fail, you know, if you allow it to work, you need to make it work. And on this 78th anniversary, that you need to find the ways and means, you know, like they say, you have the bypass, you know, if there is a bottleneck or blockade by some recalcitrant people, there are, as we know, in the field of international law also, there are gatekeepers. Like my teacher was never allowed to have his due. He's the only one who was not allowed, he was not nominated to the Institute of Law International. He had the impeccable credentials, you know. He just, I do not want to say much in the public domain today, you know, but it was the greatest, whosoever did it, it was greatest disservice, you know, to his legacy, you know. And we must pay the dues of those, everybody, every scholar and every legacy of scholarship, which my own center carried, you know. And I'm trying my best, and I'm hope I made my teacher proud. And wherever he is, if he is listening to this lecture, he'll say, lovely, marvelous. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, your expertise, your personal experiences, the valuable lessons, and the passion for the topic have illuminated the path towards a more collaborative and harmonious global future. As you highlighted the importance of charters in making the impossible to the possible, widening horizon of the state-centric system, have had a comprehensive exploration of the challenges and opportunities in revitalizing the United Nations. Once again, thank you so much, sir.